Hi there. My name is Martin French and I am an associate of Professor Sweeney. Please forgive me for crashing into your little world, but I've been asked to speak on the art of speaking, or at least to the extent of speaking in the court. My work is largely in theatre, and it suffices to say here that I've worked in theatre for about 25 years in pretty much all aspects of the art, but chiefly in recent years as a director and as an educator. Some of you will already have guessed that I'm English, and I can now confirm that I am not. I'm Irish. Why would the name French suggest English when the facts of history suggest otherwise? Through my connections on both sides of the law, I have a fairly solid idea of what's required in the court. One of my previous acting jobs, in fact, was as a defendant in mock court cases in Ireland that we used to train solicitors to become barristers, those who speak in front of the court. And since moving to Louisville, I have spoken regularly to 1Ls on this topic. Marrying my various experience and skills, what I intend to do over the next few minutes is to give you some practical advice on public speaking and on preparation for it. I'm sure many of you already have that experience of public speaking, so hopefully this will be at least a refresher for you. And while I'm sure many of you are impeccably intellectually prepared for your oral arguments, if your facts are not well conveyed, your words will not help you. Indeed, delivered poorly, your words will be like violence against your argument. Poorly used, they can only do harm. Before beginning any performance, and I would include singing or playing sport in this, you need to warm up what you're going to use. To play football, for instance, you need to warm up your legs through stretches, as football is played with a ball and a foot and not with a hand or an egg. If your warm-up happens in the arms, you're probably not playing football. I mean, the clue is in the name, surely. The best preparation for singing is for many vocally stretching through a range of notes, and for others it's keeping mouths firmly shut. Presenting a case is a matter of conveying ideas, of storytelling. To tell stories, all you ever want and all you ever need is your voice and your brain. Your brain warm-up comes with practicing and rehearsing your brief, in your case. For now, let's look at warming up your voice. I'm not going to waste time on anatomy here, so if you really want to know the details, Google is your friend. The important thing is the breath powers the voice. No breath equals no sound. Take a moment to take that in. Now, knowing that you're all planning on being lawyers, I would estimate that about 25 to 30% of you have used that pause to try to speak without breathing, and I'm sure everyone can guess who you are. Having a massive VO2 max or lung capacity is great and all, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to being able to speak. Your main job is to have an understanding of what your capacity is, even if it's a very small one. You don't want to run out of breath mid-sentence, as it's going to detract from your telling the story, and that's somebody that nobody listening will enjoy. The silence is always your enemy, and if you lose control of a sentence, if you lose control of that story, and then the attention of your listeners is broken. So the first lesson on breathing is knowing how far you can go with it. So let's start by doing that exact thing. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath, in through the nose and out over about 6 seconds. Really fill it to capacity. And then I want you to hold it for 1 second, which I'll count, and then we're going to release it through your mouth over 7. Get it all out of your system. Now, are you ready? I will count through it for you so you don't have to. And in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold for 1 and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Take a moment. The first one was, if you like, a prep run. We're going to do it again in a moment, and I want you to really pay attention to what your body is doing the next time. The reason I use this set of timing, by the way, is that it was recommended to me in terms of a means of managing mood and focus in sport. When you get upset, do a few 617s until you are in a better state of mind. and of breath before continuing, and it has tended to work both for me and for a 7-year-old child that I tend to do this with. In using these measures, I get an opportunity to teach this to, and who knows, it may be useful in the courtroom. Are we ready again? And breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold for 1 and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Get back to ordinary breathing. How did that go? Were you still taking in air at the end of me getting to 6 on the first count? Had you anything left when you got to 7? How can you balance the breath over these periods, 6 and 7 seconds? The main thing is that speaking louder is going to require more breath. Breathing out defines your words. Speaking for longer periods, as in a longer sentence without interruption, is also going to take more breath too. The main thing is to be heard and to be clear. Now take a moment, breathe deeply in, and in breathing out, make a T sound when you're without opening your teeth. See how long you can make it last. This is going to be another way of gauging how long you can breathe in. So for your further entertainment, I'll do this with you too. So a deep breath in through the nose. Well, you now know how long I can do that without preparation. I'll note I'm sitting down. It's always easier to do this kind of thing standing up, and you may or may not get the opportunity to stand when you present your case. But doing this thing gives you a good sense of how long you can speak. Of course, you don't exhale a perfectly smooth breath as you speak like we just did. It gets broken up into. So my next exercise when I'm doing this and taking it seriously in preparation for a role is to do a second one where it's regularly broken up like and then a third one which is more irregular like because that's how we speak. I would recommend doing this and many more. There's plenty of things if you're wanting to take it seriously for acting, but we're not going to worry about this too much. We're just getting you ready to be able to speak in court. Sometimes you'll have a microphone, sometimes you won't, but it's not going to be as pressured a situation in some senses in terms of how you speak as on stage. So being able to manage your breath is the important thing. So the 617 and the long thing are the factors, the ones I would use if I were you. The first one's going to give you an idea, and it's also going to be a useful thing for managing stress levels and upset. And the long thing, the second one, thanks to your own competitive nature, is going to help you develop your VO2 max just that little bit further and help teach you to manage your breath better. The longer your breath, basically, the more you can vocally do. Obviously, there's a lot more than breath that goes into speaking, but as I said, this isn't an anatomy lesson. So I'm just going to gloss over a few of these things. You don't need to know these things. You do these things without thinking about them. And if this is freaking you out, you may need to step away and forget about it for a little while before looking at it again. Consciously thinking about these things can often make you super conscious and unable to do them. The diaphragm is an important part of the whole thing. So having reasonable cardiovascular fitness is going to help you there. It'll keep you in shape. Now, I'm not saying you run a 10K every morning or eat blueberries only every third day of the week. But for those of you who can, basically being able to wheel or walk yourself for about 15 to 20 minutes without being out of breath means you're probably fine, health-wise, for this. Next up, I'm going to focus on vocal cords, and this is something that you can actively be conscious about it. The more you shout or sing in a death doom metal band, without warming up, I hasten to add, the more likely you are going to be to do damage. One easy way to prevent doing the damage is to massage your vocal cords, and there's two ways to do it: internally and externally. The internal one is extremely easy to manage. Just open up your mouth and do this. Ah, that voice cracky kind of thing, where it's basically the chords slapping against each other. It's fun to be able to do it. It's not a competition. It is not about how long or how loud or how many different tones you can do. Just take time and do it gently. This and a lot of the other vocal stuff I tend to do in the car on the way to rehearsal or a performance. You might have the time to do the same. You may not. Do take the time at the beginning of the day or on your way to your performance to do it. Now, the external massage is the old-fashioned massage. Now, you literally gently do this. Please do not speak during this. Words are very unnecessary when you're doing this, because it's only going to potentially cause damage if you do something sudden or if you don't know what you're doing. So just focus on the act. I would do that for maybe 2-3 minutes. In your cases, a minute would be more than enough. Don't need to take a lot of time with it. Obviously, you want to be aware of losing your voice. It can happen easily. I remember it happening to me when I was an acting teacher. So the humiliation, wildly frustrating, as you can imagine. Technically, it's called laryngitis, and it's an inflammation or an infection of the vocal cords. It can be caused by overusing or straining your voice, but most commonly it's caused by just viral infections like the common cold. Doesn't hit me every time I get a cold, but very, very, very occasionally it has. I think twice in my lifetime. There are dozens of remedies, but the most effective one of all of them is not using your voice. And whatever you do, don't try to whisper when you have laryngitis. That just puts a strain on your vocal cords even when you don't have laryngitis, so you're not actually helping anything. Avoid smoking and alcohol when you've got laryngitis. Drink warm liquids, chew gum, use eucalyptus where you can, take a hot shower. It normally goes away after a day or two. If it lasts longer than that, go to a doctor. And yes, people understand that sometimes you can have laryngitis. It's not going to make things easier, but allowances can be made for it. Now, on speaking, you have to be able to say what you have to say. I know that sounds obvious, but it means basically that you can write things that you just cannot say. If you want an example of that, in terms of the meaning of words, watch The Phantom Menace and try and say the words that these amazing actors can almost make sound realistic. There are also things that are physically difficult to say, like she sells seashells on the seashore, or red leather, yellow leather. Know what the ones for you are and eliminate them ahead of time. For Ireland, we have a problem with the TH. So this, that, and the other thing is one of the jokes we used to make about having the Irish accent. For yourselves in the United States, you have this weird thing where, for me, the words Mary, marry, and merry are three different things, but I hear you lot saying them and they all sound the same. Similarly, pedal and metal. The first one has a D, the second one has a T, but in an American accent, they often sound identical. Now, as an actor, what I like to do is I like to read my script early on in the process and read it aloud so that I can figure out the troublesome phrases so I can manage them. Of course, you get to write your own scripts and you can change them. Some sentences or clauses are going to be longer than you can manage. That's fixable. Some phrases practically unsayable, like the rural juror. This is an old 30 Rock bit, so look that up on YouTube and you'll be entertained by it. If you're going to say something, you need to be able to make sure that you can say it. Now, remember, these are stories that you're telling. You've written them, more or less, as stories, journeys that you're taking the jurors and the judge on. These are people's stories and they deserve to be delivered as such. When you read over your briefs, prep your story for delivery. Consider how you want your story to be delivered and where it needs to go slower, where you need to take time with it, where you need to go faster, where you need to change the tone, how to deliver it. You do not want to deliver the story of somebody who was horribly killed and murdered and bludgeoned to death in a single monotone, as that will lose people's interest very, very quickly. Now, it's no small matter, but I only mention it briefly. This is something that takes time. How to create your story. In writing it, you probably can hear how you want it delivered. Your story is going to be interrupted at some point during your delivery by either your adversary or by the judge, just like a small child interrupts you when you're telling them a story at bedtime to ask a question that makes no sense and is barely relevant. So, just like you would with a small child, answer their question with grace and generosity, and then return to your story with your practice delivery. Remember, convey the story so that people are on your side. This leads me on to what I believe to be the single most important part of any performance, and arguably this is even more so in court: confidence. It's a popularly thought sentiment that lawyers are people who work best on confidence, and I'm sure you will all agree with that you are in many ways confidence people, or as used to be known in more benighted times, confidence men, con men. Now, that is what it is to be a lawyer, right? I'm probably joking, but confidence is vitally important. Right now, some of you may still have some humility and wonder, how can I, a mere me, possibly speak before the all-powerful, all-intimidating great Oz of Ozma of the court? Well, the lesson to be learned from Gen X is that everybody feels kind of uncomfortable at the adults' table anyway, and that anybody who isn't uncomfortable there is most likely a charlatan, a confidence trickster. However, you are now the adult, and the rest of us are looking to you to be the adult. Your best route to confidence is preparation and being so prepared that it isn't even a matter of confidence, it's a matter of fact. Your words are going to be meaningless and forgettable if you cannot deliver them with belief, both in the words and also in yourself. So how do we get to there? Your belief in the words should already exist. So if you've done the work, you're good in that front. But how do we make you feel like you are an expert? Well, you are the expert. The first thing you will always need to know is that you are the expert. You know more about your case than anybody else there. You're the authority on the case, at least from your client's perspective. And where you are not the authority on a particular matter of the case, you will have the opportunity to bring in somebody who is a greater authority on the matter than you to support you. You've done the work and you have a comprehensive understanding of the case. Remember this. You are the expert in the room. Now, the judge and jury are there to be led by you. Don't forget that for your tide driving them into the correct conclusion, there is another one from your adversary attempting to drive them back out into the wilderness again. But do remember that your expertise is still greater than that of the judge and jury. If you can remember this and connect it with the idea that you're telling them a story to help them to understand the circumstances, you are going to be able to speak with authority and graciousness. They need your kind husbandry to get to the place that both you and they want to go, to a resolution that is just and best for all people involved. They want you to succeed and not to suck. This is practically identical to what I tell actors. The people who are there, however restingly grumpy their faces may look, or otherwise, they all want you to succeed. They want you to be brilliant and to make it a memorable day out. In the forthcoming oral arguments, they particularly want you to do well. But even in real life, they want you to be good. And while your opposing counsel might seem keen to beat you, even they want to see you make a good argument, which will help them to look better as far as they're concerned. So don't worry about them being biased against you from the off. If you come in confidently, they will believe what you have to say. And if you speak confidently, they will be more likely to accept your testimony. Now, after compiling your brief and having done your due diligence, there is one more thing you have to do to exude confidence, and that is rehearse. You don't need to know the lines precisely. If no one has mentioned it before, I am sorry to tell you that you are neither Shakespeare, nor Basho, nor Toni Morrison. However, you are you, the writer and performer of your own legal work, so you have space to riff a little bit. Remember, too, that all those comedians apparently improvising their set so easily on Netflix specials or on MST3K, they're all largely paraphrasing things that they already wrote. Things that they've researched, things that they've trialed and practiced at length. There's nothing dishonest in this, but never forget that these improvisations are still built around something very carefully prepared, and even when people seem like they're winging it, if they're any good, they've generally written the whole thing out. They've got the whole thing prepared in such a way that they may just refer to notes or have learned off the order. So rehearse. Use your notes as a loose script and become comfortable with it as a routine. You don't want to try and learn off word for word like a stage script, even though I use that term here, I know, and I appreciate that it may sound confusing. But you're going to be interrupted, so you need to have a fluid sense of it. Learn off the order, understand what you're going to be talking about, become very familiar with it to the point that you can improvise or riff with it. To get your confidence to this point, what I would recommend doing is practicing it again and again, repeatedly, in as close a fashion as you can to the real thing. I'd recommend that ideally you work with somebody else so that they can give you feedback, preferably somebody who has an understanding of the field, somebody who's used to law, maybe a fellow 1L if you can bear them at this stage. And when you're working with them, do it for real. Don't race through to make sure that you know it and to get all the words out. Do it at the speed that you would like to perform it so that they can give you proper feedback. The confidence you get from knowing a script inside out is immense, and especially as you're going to be interrupted by questions. You'll be able to get back on track easier if you know it backwards. Obviously, I can't see or know who you are right now, but typically in these classes, the mode age is about 24, give or take. Some of you may think everything can be still done the night before. You will crash and burn if you think like this. Trust me. This is not a get it in on time job. This is a present to us your evidence. Give us a good performance. Your physical appearance, your face is going to be your first impression, rightly or wrongly. And if you look tired or exhausted, it will be remembered. TV tropes inform how we actually read real life now. TV tropes have that tired, haggard, exhausted face as being a sign of desperation and of failure. It's not a sign of success. I cannot tell you that you must get 8 hours sleep each night, because that's not realistic for many of us, especially in the early part of our adult lives. But I cannot recommend highly enough getting the time to step away from work and getting in at least one solid sleep cycle. Everybody's is different and they're a lot shorter than you would imagine. But getting in a solid sleep cycle ahead of heading to the court makes a huge difference. Now, I would note that the CDC recommends getting 7 hours sleep or more per night for adults of the ages of 18 to 61. But, do what you can. Small children change that. Second part-time jobs change that. Noisy neighbours change that. Do what you can and do what is right for you. Now, to change the tone dramatically, I would hope that by now all of you have at least heard of The Art of War, supposedly by Sun Tzu, or ideally read it. This one book was published in English about 100 different ways as a guide to business since it got mentioned on the movie Wall Street back in 1987, and then again in The Sopranos sometime in the 90s. It's a different angle of looking at things, and it can be used to very good purpose too in most fields, including in the theatre. Early on in it, we're introduced to the 5 constant or fundamental factors of strategy. Again, translated in so many different ways, so I'm interpreting them somewhat, and I also reorder them in preparation for your oral arguments. So number 1, doctrine or moral law. The rules, as I see it, of appearing in court. This is what is expected of you. What is the cultural landscape of the court? Obviously enough, whistling while others talk is out of the question, as is getting pizza delivered to the courtroom. Most of the, if you like, moral law, the doctrine of the court, is fairly obvious because we're all immersed in an Anglophonic, US-centered TV culture. But how accurate is Law and Order or whatever court shows you particularly like or avoid? Does everything actually apply? Now, coming from Ireland, we have a very interesting context. So the simple phrasing that we use to address the judge is similar to your own. It is, Your Honour. But because of the saturation of British TV and British court shows in Irish culture, many people have shown up in the court and addressed the judge as Your Lordship, which is a very bad move in Ireland. The other thing that you see sometimes happening here in Ireland is people will, in court, plead the Fifth Amendment. They plead the Fifth. Now, pleading the Fifth in Ireland means that you agree with the decision of the state to notionally separate church from state, because that's what our Fifth Amendment is. Now, while I'm sure the Irish court system would be pleased to see so many people agreeing with these sentiments, it probably isn't what they actually mean. So being aware of what the phrases, what the terms of the court are, is going to be helpful. What they expect of you, how they expect to see you. Showing up in a football jersey, probably not going to be a good look for a lawyer. Showing up on time, very good look for a lawyer. Showing up late, no. Point 2, purpose or method and discipline. So what is your cause? Who or what are you really advocating for? And it doesn't really need an explanation. Why are you there? On whose behalf are you speaking? What outcome are you aiming for? What is an acceptable result? It's really easy to get caught up with the game of winning, or winning the game, if you like, turning it into a game. But remember, your vows to the client are not spoken to be broken. They should be your locus, your compass. They should guide you. Point 3, landscape, or as Sun Tzu puts it, earth. And this is your environment, including your position, distance, spaces, obstacles, all that kind of stuff. By my reading of it, there are 2 aspects here that you need to consider, the physical and the personal. The first is simple but vital. How is the courtroom in question set up? Is there a ramp, or are there steps, or both? How steep is that ramp? Are the steps regular? How high are they? Are the chairs fixed? How far away from the bench are you? All these kind of things. They'll help you, these simple things, but they can also throw you. And your client may or may not be familiar with courtrooms. Do your reconnaissance as soon as you can. Is this a courtroom, for instance, that's famous for being cold all the time, or maybe has poor air conditioning? Even stupid stuff that may sound insignificant, like the location of the toilets, or water dispensers, or Coke machines. This is all worth knowing and sharing with your client. In particular, your parking, and having an alternative. And indeed a second alternative. I'll get back to parking a little bit later again. What I call the personal landscape is something that often surprises people. What you wear affects you. If that's a brand new pair of shoes that you've never worn before because you don't want to ruin them before your big day in court, then there's a chance that they might prove your Waterloo if they're too tight when you're standing in them for any length of time, or if the heel's too high and it puts you uneasily when going down the slope. I'd always recommend, where possible as well, to do your rehearsal, and I've said this before, do your practice in the outfit you intend to wear. Because, sometimes for men you get shirts that cut in a little bit too tight, or when you do up the collar, your tie to put on your tie, it's just that it feels that little bit uncomfortable. Your job is to stop things unrelated to your job from obstructing you from doing your job. Do your preparation. The fourth factor, Sun Tzu calls heaven, which is actually, as he relates it in the book, related to climate, factors affecting the landscape, but not the landscape. So that could be weather, stakeholder actions, which in the case of the court could be questions. So again, it's an obvious when you think about it thing. It's still worth considering. Matters that affect what you're planning has you prepared for. So it's not so much a case of predict the unpredictable as be prepared for all eventualities. One aspect is to expect that there will be questions from the bench. Unless you're in a Hollywood movie court, discovery is going to prepare you for pretty much anything that your adversary is going to have. But the workings of a judge's mind are unknown and unknowable. But you can be sure that if there's one area of the argument that you're not comfortable with or not familiar with, that is where their mind will be drawn. Be prepared for questions about the bits you don't want questions about. The other aspect that is unpredictable but is manageable, especially in Louisville, is generally the weather. 10 minutes of rain erases the difference between a $10 haircut and a $100 one. So, umbrellas? A political rally or protest will mess up downtown traffic at pretty much any time of the day, particularly around the courthouse. This isn't to pick sides or chastise, because the right to protest is one of the vital keys to American democracy. But it's really important to factor this in and prepare alternatives, not least of which is alternative parking. So speaking of parking, I remember, it must be 7 or 8 years ago, when there was an oral argument on a Saturday. By the Saturday mid-morning, people coming in to speak were suddenly having difficulties because all around the courthouse was closed down. Not for a protest or for roadworks, but manhole covers were exploding off the road. I am not joking about this. There was some kind of sewer issue, I can't remember. There's no way of expecting this or planning for this specific. But having your alternative parking plan, your alternative access route, is something that affects not just you, but also your client, your adversary, and potentially even the judge. You should ask Professor Sweeney about that day. That was pretty remarkable. Now, some of you are sitting there smugly thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me because this is going to be on Zoom, and the way things are going, it's going to be that way for some time. So I'm not going to be having to worry about this. Yeah, sure. At this point, I need to remind you that I'm here live. I am not a cat. The fifth point is leadership, which is called in the book The Commander. And these are choices based on other factors and your own resources. Now, it's a bit more oblique, and you could argue that I'm shoehorning this in, but leadership in this context is how you deal with the circumstances of preparation. Good leadership as an individual, as a sole trader, if you like, as an individual speaker, it's the management of your resources. And this is banal, but it is checking, do you have the umbrella in the trunk of your car? I was going to say boot because I'm foreign. Do you have change for the meter or for the parking structure? Do you have a waterproof folder to put your script or notes in? Is there gas in the tank or an appropriately early bus if there's other difficulties? Have you determined what you can manage and what you cannot? Have you your alternatives planned out? Leadership in public speaking, in performing in the court, is being in control of the situation and ensuring what you can control, and the alternatives and their order for that which you cannot control. Now, you're thinking this sounds like a lot. We do this almost every day. We have plans to deal with the milk going off in the fridge, or a partner coming home late from work, or by being cornered by that one person in the other classes who smells weird. It's clearly none of you who are watching this are the smelly one. You're all got impeccable taste. Being conscious of it may seem like just one more thing on top of a load of things going into this, but it does no harm. It does absolutely no harm to have a rundown list to go through the plans for the day before you present. Draw up the list, update it as you learn more, and go through it the day before. Check them all off. Umbrella in the boot, check. Change for a change of clothes if it's super wet, check. A towel. All these odd little things. You'll have your own ones. Do it out in depth and expect it to need tweaks. Plan to adjust it the next time. Plan to adjust it the next time after that. This is the way. One of the things I've always had as an actor is a mild case of stage fright. Nerves really, nothing too big. I focus on two things, my first line and my character line. The character line is the line that I feel helps me become the character, and generally I use the same line throughout the whole of the run. It's normally just one line that helps me summon up the right place, the right approach, the right mindset for the character. The first line obviously is vital. It's the audience's first impression, the keyhole through which the audience will approach the character and the play. Once I speak, my nerves generally dissipate, but the wait for it is the hardest thing. Now, having some nerves before speaking is not a sign to quit. It means you care enough not to be unbothered by failure. So that's a good thing. But how do we manage these nerves? How do we stop ourselves being prevented from doing our job through stage fright? Well, again, I go back to the line thing. You have a very, very clear and very obvious advantage as performers. I'm talking about lawyers, because you have a very clear purpose. This person or people you are representing need you to advocate for them. You have a secondary advantage in that you only have to learn your first line once. As public speakers, you have the same line every single time. You don't have to worry about it. It also sets the agenda, sets the sense of occasion, sets the moment, and it also can help you to become the character you need by going through these motions. Good morning, Your Honour. May it please the court. Understand what this phrase means. Understand where it comes from and where it puts you. This is a ritual, and these are the ritual words that break the silence. It's an incantation that creates the legal universe within which you will be working once you say them. Good morning, Your Honour. May it please the court. When you prepare, include this in your practice. It's only a few seconds long, and it gives you a moment to test out your volume, to test your speaking voice, to test what the room is like. It allows the court to settle and for the jury to become attentive to you now instead of the judge or whoever was speaking before you. It shows that you mean business. You can do this. Good luck.